here. And I think, and this is my opinion, is that there is so much more pressure on the island and island resources due to the increase in population that we have more need than ever for help for folks that find themselves without housing in the winter, and particularly during severe cold. Severe cold to Northwesterners is not severe cold to Midwesterners. And severe cold to us is where it's kind of nebulous, where it dips around 33, if it's windy, 32 and lower. We do not have enough resources to have a winter shelter for people who find themselves with inadequate housing. This is not the community that has a homeless shelter. We do not have resources for that. We do have a decent number of resources, which is surprising and delighting everybody. As you can see, I mean, I don't know, how many old-time Islanders have tried to get a group of people together? It just is really hard, and clearly there is support and, like-mindedness around this issue. And I'm really excited to introduce Dwight. Dwight Colley is an Islander from Pennsylvania, I'll put it that way. And he had the good fortune to show up at the Severe Winter Shelter regular meeting, which is on Tuesdays at noon at the Key Bank basement, upstairs at Key Bank. Anyway, anybody is welcome to come to that meeting. If you're on the email list, you'll get notification of reminders and all kinds of trying to get you there with stuff to eat, etc. So anyway, Dwight has been running temporary severe weather shelters in Pennsylvania. So he showed up at the meeting. We're like, hello, guess what? We're having a training session that you are leading on December 9th. And he was more than willing, and he has an extensive background in psychology and is just a wonderful implant that we're very grateful to have. So this is Dwight Colley.
Yay!
Well, first thing I've got to say is, because I've already mentioned that I'll never become an Islander because I haven't got that long left. I've been coming here for 20 years because my folks have a place on Henry Island. And so I've been coming here for 20 years, and finally my wife and I decided we didn't want to live in Pennsylvania anymore, or on the East Coast, so where do we want to go? And I went, I know where. And so she acquiesced, and that's why we're here. And it's funny, I'm looking at my definition of homeless here. I'm homeless right now. By definition, homeless. Because I have to stay at my brother's place, who has, well, mine's being rebuilt. So that is one of the definitions of homeless. But my experience is I've never done this episodic homelessness. Back when we did, we had a program where we had 14 churches involved, and the guys would go to one church one night, and the guys and the girls would go to the other church at night. And we ran it from the evening and 7 days a week. We used to get about 60 men and about anywhere between 15 and 20 women. So it's a bigger problem there, of course, and I don't know what the problem is here. I don't think anybody has a handle on how many homeless there actually are in San Juan County. When I say San Juan County, though, I was told that most of them, of course, don't be here on San Juan Island. We have really no idea. So what I thought I'd do today is give you an introduction to who homeless are, because everybody's got a different opinion of that. Excuse me. And when you find out who they are, I think you're going to be less, and I'll use this word cautiously, fearful of them. Because when volunteer, we used to do this training for the volunteers back east, and they'd come in and they'd be kind of nervous about it and not really want to interact. It'd be the homeless on this side of the table and the volunteer on the other side of the table, and they never kind of intermixed, please.
Sorry.
And they never intermixed. And that's one of the things we really want to do, is to get you folks to intermix with the homeless, because when you intermix with them, you're allowing them to talk to somebody who's quote-unquote normal, that is living a normal life. And it allows them to talk to someone about something other than survival. There's a lot more to life than survival. But these folks, that's all they think about are 24/7. Where am I going to get something to eat? Who's going to harass me? Who's going to, from the other homeless populations, bother me? Who's going to steal from me? And where am I going to spend the night? I don't care if it's 80 degrees out. They still want to know where they're going to spend the night. Because a lot of them don't have permanent campsites. So you being able to interact with them allows them to feel, if you will, more, and I hate this word, I'm a psychologist, and I took a whole year in a course called What's Normal. And what the basic definition is, if you're at either end 2% at either end of the bell curve, you're normal. So that's what, 96% of the population. There's a lot of variance in there. So that's what I'm trying to do today, is to kind of introduce you to who they are. Homelessness is basically defined as lack of permanent housing. Many people, they have places to go. As you'll see, I've got a couple of definitions there of temporary housing. These are the ones that we find mostly. These are the people that are out of their homes because they've lost their job. The woman, this is generally the case for this, who's lost the breadwinner, because she's been home taking care of the kids, and her significant other or husband has been out bringing her the money. Now, so they lose him. They can lose him either through death, they can lose him to, in many cases, going to jail, or because he decides he doesn't want to be there anymore, he's quit. And it can go the other way too, of course, but 90% of the time you find it going that way. So it's someone who lost a breadwinner, and they're not used to it, so they lose their homes because they don't have any money. Or the sale of their homes. They're living in a home, they're paying rent, and the homeowner decides to sell the home. He sells it, comes in and says, you got 2 weeks to leave. Now, most of us have been told all along, you're supposed to put 6 months of savings aside in case it's an emergency, right? I'm not going to ask for hands, but how many have got 6 months savings in their bank account? I know I don't. I got to take it somewhere else, but not my bank account. But these people don't have that kind of resources to even start talking about 2 months supply of emergency funds in the bank. So 2 weeks come along, they fret, they're working, they're on the street. So that's what we call temporary, and then they can finally get together. Then we have the episodic ones. That's me. I'm couch surfing right now. My brother's not here, so I got the whole house. But these are people that go from friend to friend to friend, but they have really no place of their own. This is kind of what we call the hidden homes. You never hear about them because they're still bouncing around. Well, eventually, people get tired of this, of accommodating people. You've all heard the definition of, what a guest is, how they equate to fish.
Yeah.
Well, you can imagine if you've got a homeless person being with you, this gets old real quick. So they're asked to move on, and they do, and they finally run out of resources, and then they're on the street. And then there's the chronic. These are the ones that have been homeless by definition for a year. Or another side of that, which is maybe they've been homeless 4 times during the course of the year. They're considered to be chronic homeless. These are the ones that we mostly see in the shelters. And there's all kinds of reasons, and we're going to go through a whole bunch of them, why they're there chronically not living someplace. Some of them have jobs. Many of them have jobs. But we'll get into why that doesn't work as well. If you want to use a number of how many people are in the United States that are homeless every night, it's about 750,000. That's every night these folks are homeless. If you're in a shelter, you're considered homeless. So they don't consider homeless, homeless shelter to be a permanent place, so it's considered to be homeless. That's a lot of people. But I don't think the state of Wyoming has that many people. Okay, 46% of those people are sleeping in cars, abandoned buildings, cardboard boxes, old railroad cars, in doorways. They're not in shelters. They're out there every night. If you go to, I don't know how many are big cities, but if you go to my first experience with them is Washington, D.C. She didn't mention, but before I became a psychologist, I was a Secret Service agent. So we were in Washington, D.C., and they're all over on the steam grates. And being on the steam grates, they're nice and warm, yes, but what are they? Full of water, right? So they can't leave the steam grate on the frozen nights. That's how people do it. That's how people cope with the cold. All right. Let's look at some of these people. 38%. These are, I think these are the numbers the government gives you, and they're pretty good. The government websites is the homeless. They've really done a good job of counting people, and we'll talk something about how we count homeless people at the end here. A third of them are alcohol dependent. A quarter of them abuse drugs. Now the alcohol dependent ones are the older guys. They're out there, they've been probably alcoholic most of their lives, and it's finally caught up with them. Quarter of them are drug dependent. These are the younger guys, the younger kids. Now, I don't know what the problem is here, but the problem is sweeping at least the West Coast, and you've all read about it, is the heroin epidemic. I don't know what the problem with that here is, but it really, for the last 2 years, we'd see more and more and more of it. About 20 to 25% of these people have mental health issues. Now, so having had mental health issues, they themselves, of course, cannot interact properly with the society. But that figure, I think, is pretty clear in the fact that on any given day, 22% of the normal population has mental health problems. So it's not really that different. Sure, these folks have mental health problems, and because of being homeless, they generally don't get appropriate treatment for it, so they stay in this realm of being mentally ill. As I say, 22% of the normal population at any given time has mental health issues. So it's not much different. It's just that they're not getting treated for it, and the other part usually gets some treatment for it. A lot of them are victims of trauma, and I'll talk about that pretty much as we go on. Now, this is trauma either in the home of origin, this is trauma during the course of their life, and of course, with the war going on, we're getting a lot of these vets come back, and they're suffering from trauma. They cannot integrate back into society as easy as someone. I'm a Vietnam vet, and I remember coming back and seeing some of the guys not being able. I went back to Hawaii, where I'm from, and of course they all moved to Kauai because they could move to Kauai and go live in the hills and the mountains and the caves and not be bothered by the rest of the community. So a lot of people, we're getting a lot of vets now that are becoming homeless. This is not just this war, or Vietnam happens after every war. There's a lesson there somewhere, I think. Okay, and then the other part is most of the people that we see in the homeless population aren't just one of these. They got a combination of things. And you see it with mental illness and drugs. They get there, they're mentally ill, they're depressed, or they're psychotic, one or the other, one doesn't make any difference. So they do drugs to make themselves feel better, to cure whatever problem they think there is. Instead of having appropriate medication, they'll go out and take something to make themselves feel better. Same with alcohol. They'll use alcohol to cure whatever they see as their problem. So most of these people don't have just one issue, they got two, maybe all four. It's not unusual to see this. Most of these people are between the ages of, what have I got here, 20 and 64 years of age. The life expectancy of someone on the street is only 42 to 50 years of age. They don't live long. And that's true. I just learned the other day that this couple that we had, I've known her for 10 years. Both these people, both alcoholics, could come into the shelter. I was only with the shelter 6 years, but the shelter's been open 10. They would come into the shelter every winter for 10 years. Last Friday, they froze to death. Back in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. The program there started because someone froze to death. The problem this time was they froze to death before the shelter opened. There, the shelter's open December 1st. So they got drunk. I'm sure what happened is they got drunk. They were going back to their camp. One of them probably passed out. The other one stayed with her, him or her, I don't know which went first, and they died of exposure. That you don't want in your community. So that's what we're trying to avoid, of course, by having this shelter program. Okay, causes of homelessness. Dysfunctional family of origin. You grow up in a dysfunctional home, and one day I'll find a functional one. I can tell by that, you know what I mean. But I'm talking about severely dysfunctional. Your mom's mentally ill, dad's a drunk, God knows what happens. But when you grow up in that type of environment, what are you going to end up being? You know that as well as I. You're not going to be exactly fit. No, that's an incorrect word. You're not going to be as generous about society, integrating with society, as someone who grew up in a quote-unquote normal home. So we have that problem, dysfunctional home. That's when they start early. Let me give you an example. We had a family in the shelter, mother, dad, and son. Son was 22 years old. The parents, I never did figure out what the problem was. But the son didn't, he knew that he had to get out of this cycle, because he didn't want to be like his mom and dad when they were in their late 50s. So he came to me, he says, what can I do to get out of this mess I'm in? He was 22. And of course he had not finished school or anything like that. And I said, okay, let's go to the Salvation Army. Went to talk to the major at the Salvation Army. She hired him. And that was his first job he'd ever had, his first inkling of wanting to do something that was like everybody else. A year later, he was still employed with them, but he was moving furniture for them, things like this, but he had a job. And that was his way of beginning to get out of that cycle. His parents are still in the shelter, but he's not. He's not in the shelter. He makes enough money that he can have his own place. And believe me, when they finally get their own place, it's like they found nirvana. So, you know, he realizes what life can be, so now I'm pretty sure he'll be all right. I'm going back to next month. I'm going to look him up. They suffer from physical abuse. We find this to happen in many homes. Generally, it's usually, of course, most domestic violence cases are. It's usually the man against the woman. But that's not always the case, believe me. In my years as a police officer, I found that out. That's not necessarily true. But anyway, they suffer from physical abuse, so they're running away. Sexual abuse, same thing. Most sexual abuse occurs in the home. So they suffer from that. They realize, I've got to get it, or they know they have to get away from this stuff, so they leave. And of course, they leave with nothing. Nobody plans on doing this. So they leave with nothing. They end up on the street. Mental health problems at home. Mom or dad are suffering from mental illness. Not them necessarily, but mom and dad, or maybe both are. So they again, same problem as dysfunctional home. They leave to get away from it. Foster care system. This is something that I personally think is a shame in this country. We get people in the shelter that have been in 7, 8, 9, 10 foster homes as a teenager. These are your formative years, right? You get into this foster care system, and you're shipped from one home to another, to another, to another. That's home. By definition, that's a homeless person right there. That's like couch surfing. But these kids live this life. They turn 18 years old, and what happens? The spigot gets cut off. You're out on the street now. You have to find your own way in life. Well, they're nowhere near prepared, and they've been dysfunctional for years, so we see a lot of that in the younger population. That one caused me to go on and on and on. Divorce. Parents have a divorce, and someone has to leave. You know, that's why it creates some people out there that are, of course, homeless. Unemployment. Unemployment is a real problem, but the biggest problem for these homeless people for unemployment is lack of identification. If you don't have an ID, a driver's license, state driver's license, or a state ID card, you can't get a job. Now, I haven't tried to get my Washington license here yet, but I've been told just cash in my one from back east and I can get one. That's what my wife did. But the other side of the coin is if you have nothing, we can get you a birth certificate. That's not a problem. Though some people, it is a problem. But we used to have one person who did nothing but get the homeless birth certificate. The other issue is, you may have a birth certificate, we can get your Social Security card, because that's easy enough to do. But the big thing is, where's your electric bill? Where's your lease? Where's your other bill that you need to show that you are a resident here? They don't have that. So if we can get it, so they can't get the ID card that they need to get the job. They can get the birth certificate, that's fine. They can get the Social Security card, that's fine. But you still can't get a job. Because you can't fill out that I-9 that everybody has to fill out in order to get employed. Because you haven't got an ID card. Well, we tried, and we got our fingers squashed pretty good for this one, giving out leases and using the address of our office. That went okay for about a year, and somebody at DMV found out about it, really got upset. So we had to stop that. In order to get housing, you have to have an ID card. Government housing, housing for the government program, you have to have an ID card. So with employment, it's important that they can get an ID card. That's the most important thing they can do. And I don't know how it works here, but I think it's going to be just as difficult here as it is everywhere else I've been. A medical condition. You're a diabetic, you've lost one of your legs. What kind of a job can you do? Not much. You've got a bad heart. You've got some kind of a chronic disease. You've got cancer. Medical conditions are a big reason for being homeless. I would say 25% of the people we had in the shelter had a significant medical problem that kept them from working. We'll get into more health issues a little later on, because that's a big one. Foreclosure. You know, you've lost your job. Just one of the people, everybody in the household has lost their job for some reason, maybe not your own fault, and you can't keep your mortgage payments up, or your rent payments up. There goes your job. I mean, there goes your home. You're on the street. The deputy comes, throws everything out on the street, and there you are. Okay, just a couple of quick facts. Let's look at what makes up this homeless population. About 40% of them are African American. Close behind them, at 40%, is Caucasian. Then the Hispanics, about 13%, Native Americans, about 4%, and Asians, 2%. And I think if you look into those numbers, you can sure see why that they get, sure the populations of Native Americans, the population of Asians are smaller, but you can also look at their lifestyles and their family things, and you'll see that that's probably the reason for those numbers. Single men make up 50% of the population, homeless population. Single women about 20. Families with children, this is the big one, 30%. And trying to find, we did not take families with children in the shelter I was working at, ran, because we weren't prepared for it, we couldn't do it. But trying to find somebody show up at the door, 2 o'clock in the morning, a woman and 2 kids, we're not gonna say, no, you can't come in. And they always did it on a Friday night. Because you'd have to keep them all weekend, so you could finally tie them up with some kind of services come Monday morning. But if you try calling the child advocacy or whatever program they had on the weekend, they're supposed to have a weekend duty caseworker, but good luck. So, yeah, that's a big problem. And of course, unaccompanied youth. These are youths that are under 18 and they've run away from home, or they've been thrown out of their home, or whatever it is, now they're on the street. Now, schools are supposed to take care of them, but it doesn't do any good on a weekend. Cities, 70%, make up 70% of the homeless population. That makes sense. 20% of them come from the rural community, and then, now, excuse me, I mean from the suburban community, and then 10% from the rural community. So that makes sense, but that's how it usually breaks down. Okay, what kind of poverty? This is a real tough one. This is your working poor. They work at, I don't know what the minimum wage is here in Washington, back in Pennsylvania, $7.25. Pardon? $11. No, they're almost got, they haven't quite still got enough to rent a house yet. You could have a job, but you couldn't afford a house, because it takes about $15 an hour, no, $18 an hour, to be able to afford to rent a place. Now here it's probably even worse. But we're talking even just renting a room. So they could be working, but they still can't make it. And I can remember, you know, we used to have the overnight person at the shelters we had. That was their job at 3 and 4 in the morning, was to go around and wake up those that had jobs, because they had to take either a bus or they had to walk or ride a bicycle, because they didn't have cars, to get to work. So they could go make the $7, $8, $9, and $10 an hour. What we tried to do there, of course, is encourage them to stay in the shelter for 4 months. We were open 4 months. Stay with us every night and save that money, so that when the shelter closes, come the 31st of March, you can now go out and get a room. You certainly, that's the best you can do. I mean, how are you going to come up with first and last month's rent plus a security deposit? I bought my, this is kind of an example. I bought my house here 18 months ago, and I knew I wasn't going to live here for a year, so I wanted to rent it out. So since I wasn't going to be here, I turned it over to a rental agency, and that's what they wanted from the people, was first and last month's plus a security deposit of a month's rent. I ended up forking over first and last month's rent to get somebody in. so the house wouldn't stay open. So if I could, if he's, it was a lot of money as far as I was concerned, but still. But that's somebody that owned a company here in town. So the first and last month's rent is a real problem. The problem, you have to make, as I say, $18 an hour on average to be able to afford a place to live. Okay, injury or illness. You get hurt on the job. You got a good job. You get hurt on the job. And all of a sudden you're getting workers' comp. Now, workers' compensation is not going to be anywhere near what you were making. So, again, or you get ill, you can no longer work. And you're on the street. Mental illness. Again, we talked about that. Somebody becomes mentally ill, which can happen in the best of circumstances. As I say, 22% of the population at any given time has a mental health problem. Well, you get a mental health problem, if you haven't got good support, you're probably going to lose your job, particularly if you're depressed or schizophrenic or something like this. Guaranteed you're schizophrenic, you're going to lose your job. But you're depressed, chances of you losing your job is you can't get up in the morning, or you go to work, you're irritable, or if you're bipolar disorder, you become really nasty. Yeah, we can help you, but you've already lost your job. Medication doesn't instantly cure mental health problems. It takes time. So you've lost your job due to mental health issues. So that can happen almost immediately. Now, I'm going to cover one more and then we take a break for a minute. As I said, foster care system and the adverse childhood experiences. I did a study in the shelter population that I was at. There's a test out there called the Adverse Childhood Experience. It's a questionnaire, a psychological questionnaire. It's got 10 different things that could happen to you at home. Now, if you have 2 of them, you're considered to be a trauma victim. I did about 200 of these on the population that came through the shelter last year. The average score was 4 for this adverse childhood experiences. Now, these are things that happen to you before you're 18 years of age. There were such things as dad going to prison, divorce, alcohol problems at home, things like this. And so if 2 considered you could have a childhood trauma, if you had 4, that really shows you were messed up. And that's what the average was for this population. I'm sure it's no different here. So if somebody gets a grant, I'd love to do this nationwide. But the whole thing is that it's not, these early childhood experiences create the problem. We're not social workers. I want to make that point very clear. People who work in shelters as volunteers are not social workers. You're not there to fix the problem. You might be able to suggest something to them. Maybe they ought to go to family resources, or they ought to go to this, that, the other thing. But don't take on the problem. We'll talk more about that when we get to the rules of the shelter. But as I say, adverse childhood experiences is a big problem. That in the shelter population, and it creates it. Okay, why don't we've been at it for 40 minutes, 45 minutes, let's take a little break. Okay, get more coffee.
Oh, I was just going to count you, and now you're going to move around. 33.
Oh, thank you.
No, there's 33. Overlaps at 10:30 and leads to 7.
We need those.
There is a clipboard floating around.
Right, we have it.
You have it, Bonnie? Okay.
Yeah.
On the clipboard is, more requests for email, phone number, contact information, and your availability. Assuming that you're willing to volunteer for shifts at the shelter. I wanted to offer a quick oversight vision of the shelter, how it might work once it gets activated. There was a press leak. I had talked to a number of churches, and I happened to mention those churches to the press. I talked to these churches, this one is pretty sure they're gonna do it, and that got out, that they are in the rotation, but the reality is that today, we just have one church that's in the rotation, one location. That's Friday Harbor Pres. We have the 395 Spring Street location, which is a little house. And it's really quite perfect because there are 2 rooms so that men and women can be separated. And so we're really happy to have that rotation, but I personally think it's a lot to ask one organization to just bear the full, whatever the word is, of this effort. So I'm very hopeful that 2 others will step up if they're able. And, we don't know reasons why people do or don't, but we're hopeful. So the vision for the shelter, really quick, is that Red Cross has agreed to loan us their van, which is parked here on the island and equipped with, Bill, it's just parked here at this point. Red Cross doesn't have it appointed with anything, right?
Doesn't have what, I'm sorry?
The van. It's just empty at your house, right?
That's right.
Okay, so Bill is the director of San Juan County Red Cross?
Yeah.
Okay, and so he reached out to his colleagues and they agreed to loan us the van for the duration of this effort, which would be around March 15th or whenever the reasonable end to our measure of inclement weather would be, like you guessed, March 15th. So they had agreed to loan us the van. We today have foodstuffs to appoint the van with. Red Cross is loaning us their cots, and some other supplies have been ordered with the very generous donations that we've received. So that van will either be parked at the Presbyterian Church or elsewhere. That's in the works right now. And then when the shelter becomes activated, it's when it's considered severe cold weather. And to us, severe cold weather is when, I don't know, it's very nebulous. So I will be watching the weather. I'll make a recommendation that the shelter be activated. That recommendation will be reviewed by 2 other steering committee members. But, we need to be in agreement about that use of resource. Then the shelter will become activated at whatever location is in the rotation. The phone message will be changed, a sign will be put up, and then I'll mob it all over Facebook and other social media to indicate that it's activated. I'll make some phone calls to the Sheriff's Department, to Family Resource Center, to any number of places to tell them, okay, shelter's activated, it's cold, it's located here, one of whichever location. So then the van is delivered, and this only happens once the volunteers are lined out. So for every activation, we need 6 volunteers, 2 for the evening shift, 2 for the overnight shift, and 2 for the morning shift. The evening shift will set up and prepare dinner, which is a simple soup. The overnight shift, there will be 1 person that's paid a per diem or a stipend of $100, and that is at the discretion of the steering committee who that person is. It will not be the same person every night. That is a rotating, bonus of being that person. And then once the shelter, once it concludes, it's all packed up and put back in the van.
Do you do something in the morning?
We do oatmeal in the morning.
Okay.
Oatmeal.
So it's at 6:30 in the morning.
What is the
breakfast.
close of the shift too? 6:30 till?
So, that is a little bit in flux too, because some of the locations have morning groups. So for example, at 395 Spring Street, if it were activated on a Wednesday, they have a group that meets at 6:30 in the morning. And so unless, well, actually, no, they have a group that meets from 6:30 to 7:30. The men's AA group meets there from 6:30 to 7:30, so we need to be out of there, packed up, gone by 6:15 on that day. So that would also inform whether or not we activated that site. Like, it's going to be cold for one day according to the weather, be kind of a bummer for everybody to have to leave right, at 6:30. So we would call another site and go, can you stand in the gap for a couple days on this? If they didn't have any activities, but we're working around everybody else's schedules. That's the reality of it. And, you know, I really wanted to emphasize that all of the people that we've contacted, the churches, the fire department, you know, a number of others, they've all responded very positively. And they, for example, St. David's, it's just not possible for them to open their doors because they have activities in the basement, you know, every night, essentially. And, well, they have preschool, and it can't be broken down every night. Preschool takes a long time to set up, and they already do that once a week. So they are putting on a concert, you know, and we, the Presbyterian Church happens to have an outbuilding, so that's kind of cool. You know, I think a lot of the brunt of this, not the brunt, but, you know, in large measure, it will end up at that house. You know, not everybody agrees that we should go out to ICC, which is down a slippery hill. So all that to say, the churches are doing what they can, even if they're not into the rotation. So we're just kind of working with that goodwill, and yeah, so.
What do you anticipate is going to be the bed needs, you know, like 10 people?
We're preparing for 10 at this point. So we ordered 10 sleeping bags with pillows. We're appointing the van for 10 people. And then, you know, Amazon Prime, if we need more, we'll get more. So, yeah. Yes, sir.
Have you looked into possibilities of the vacant life care center being used?
We have not. It's a good idea. I think the idea was floated before we contacted the organizations that we did contact. One of the things that we will not provide is privacy. So those rooms are empty, but they also have doors that close. And so that just isn't going to go down in this instance. Yes, ma'am.
Do you want to speak about the families and?
Yes, thank you. Joan has just been awesome in this effort. If you see a poster, she put it up. So thank you, Joan. Families with children will be at the Family Resource Center, just here. And, oh, I meant to say that when we do activate the shelter, we will be considering it, you know, early in the morning, and it will be activated by 10 a.m. So by 10 a.m.-ish, you know, it's a lot of moving parts with the volunteers, and we have to have 6 that are willing and committed to show up. Once the volunteers are lined out, then it'll become activated, but like at 10 in the morning, and so the notifications will start going out at that point.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
So I just had a conversation earlier this morning with someone about the fact that my house is 10 degrees warmer than her house in the valley.
Mhm.
At 20, you know, she was 21 yesterday, I was 31.
Yeah.
How, where do you, what measure do you use to decide whether or not it's cold?
It's cold out, you know, it's cold out there, and I don't know. I mean, we have a limited amount of resources, and we have a lot of big-hearted, intelligent volunteers who are trying to make that decision based on what our, you know, based on what's happening.
Temperature or something.
Yeah.
airport.
It's really hard. It's really hard, you know, it'd be awesome to have a shelter, and if the homeless people that we know are wandering around, you know, they need shelter every night, no matter what, but that's just not who we are. We're just, we're gonna jump off from here, and there's no easy answer to that. Joan?
What is Works' criteria? They've been successful, I think you said, for like a year now.
I can't get a hold of them. I know, and so one of their biggest problems, it has been overnight volunteers. And I don't know what their dems are over there, but we decided to make it, because of the donations were so generous, we decided to make it a per diem position. And everybody who volunteers will have a background check. Everybody who volunteers overnight will have to have a few more skills, and will be, again, at the discretion of the steering committee, who those people are in rotation. And I'll just say we're not in a position to be choosy, but by the same token, we have to guard the program's integrity. Like a person.
Winnie, could you talk about the qualifications, please? Not for the volunteers, but the people who will come, and how you draw the line, or who knows, and do they know ahead of time that they might go that night?
So There aren't any requirements for anybody who has inadequate shelter and wants to stay there, can stay there, yes. Anybody, you know? I don't
Right.
think there'll be a lot of people staying there for sport, but, you know.
I think, you know, some shelters require a clearance of police and things like that, but people stay away from them. I know the ones we ran, and I was gonna get into this, but I'll talk about it right now.
Can you come here though, Dwight, so that,
The only requirement was for you to show up and give us a name. We don't care what name you gave us, because we didn't do a background check, we didn't do anything. You came up, you gave us a name, you gave us, if there was a registration form, and we'll get into this in a minute, that everybody had to fill out. Very basic internet information. We'll talk about that a little bit. And that was the only requirement for you to be there. And so, I'm going to hold off on that because I got a whole spiel about that.
yeah, we might be getting ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, I think we are
Wait,
here,
Dwight,
but-
why don't you pick up where you
Yeah,
left
so
off?
let me grab my cheat sheet here. I can tell you what's going to happen if you've got anywhere, I don't know how your government structure is, whether it be a city or a town structure, or county structure. Everybody starts off with this, doing it just during cold weather. And what happens is you're so successful that it morphs into something more. And that's my dream for here, is that there be some place, you know, that can be accommodated. But that takes time. I know we started the program back, as I say, in a bigger, much bigger community, of course. Well, actually, it wasn't, only 35,000 people. So it was bigger, of course, but started with just a couple of hundred volunteers. And the last report I wrote, we had 1,865 volunteers for that 4-month period. And we had 14 churches involved. So once people get to know the program, be surprised the research. We had fundraisers, and there's another, I don't know if any of you have seen it, there's a movie about a homeless guy, and now I'm blocking.
Richard Gere, that one.
Richard Gere's movie, yes.
I'm thinking
About it, you know, we put on one of those, you know, the town theater, put it on, we put it in, has, you know, donations and things. That's a pretty good movie. You can get it on Netflix. And it's pretty accurate. It shows a man who he was a very successful man, lost his job because of a number of issues, became homeless, and then he turned to alcohol, and his daughter worked in a bar, which didn't help anything. She worked as a barmaid, and so that didn't help anything, and things like that. It just goes through the whole downward spiral of what happens to people. So, as I say, it's on Netflix. Okay, back where I was. All right, I've already ranted about foster care. It's true, foster care generates so much of the homeless population because they don't know how to function properly in society. They have to adapt to everything they do, and generally, sometimes there's abuses involved. Their whole self-worth is nothing because, you know, of what's happening to them, the life that they've had to lead. Again, so foster care creates reasons why they become homeless. Already talked about physical and sexual abuse. This is mostly a problem, of course, among the women and children. I mean, the women and the families. The problem is they've all left the home because of what's going on. If you're, as a child, if you've lived a homeless life, I can tell you right off the bat, you're going to be homeless yourself. Because that's just the way it works. You learn that lifestyle, and it's so difficult to get out of it. Believe me, the lifestyle of homelessness is just that. It becomes a lifestyle. Now, there are people out there, and I became friends with a number of them, who are homeless because they want to be. They enjoy the freedom of it. Nobody tells you what to do, when to do it, how to do it. You come and go as you please. You interact with who you want all the time. You don't have to be with these people. Like I'll call him a friend. I've known him for 10 years. And he'll tell you right off the bat, I'm a drunken bum. That's my life. This guy's had a wife and kids. He's a veteran. He's got everything. He had a good job. But in this case, he kind of went off the deep end when his brother killed himself. So, but I knew this guy, as I say, for 10 years. And he'd be up at the shelter every winter. He'd be there in the summertime. He'd leave. Because that's what he says, this is what I enjoy. And so there's a lot of those that you see as well. And but nothing you can do about it. Surprising, I got a phone call just the other day that Mike has a room. I couldn't believe it. He's got a room. He's on Social Security now. He's old enough he gets Social Security. And he's got a room. Now, whether or not he'll keep it, it's going to be another question. But that's to say, some people choose that lifestyle. The interesting thing about Mike was funny. He had some medical problems, and we'll get into some of that. And he went to the hospital. And I said, I've known this guy for 10 years. And so I went to the hospital to visit him. And I'm looking at, he's laying there in bed with a sheet on him. And I said, something's weird here. Because I'm looking at his legs. Something's weird. And I know, they put you in a hospital, that they put you those pumps on your calves to keep you from getting blood clots. Well, there was only one of them. And it looked like his right leg stopped at the knee. I know this guy for 10 years, never knew he was missing a leg. He wore a prosthesis, obviously, and he always walked. And I was too embarrassed to ask him about it. And after he got out of the hospital, I kept walking, and I always noticed how he held it when he crossed his legs, how his left leg was always over his right leg, which is unusual for a right-handed person. But it's just saying that, you don't know these people necessarily. He never told me about it. So I was still curious today. When we go back, maybe I'll ask him. So, all right. That's just the story. Runaways, obviously, you're going to get those. The best way, and we plan on doing it here, is if we get a runaway that's someone under 18 who's run away from home, is you call here to the sheriff's office. Because that's who should be handled. They can either get them in touch with the court system to get them with the help they need. We don't want to deal with it because when you're dealing with kids, it's a real fragile situation. In the sheriff's office, at least where I work at the police department, they would probably resolve the situation that night in about 90% of the cases. So, and while I'm speaking of sheriff's office, when he was talking about who would be notifying when the place is open, the hospitals, the fire department, all of this kind of stuff. The sheriff's department is probably the most important for two reasons. One, they know where the homeless are. And when it gets real cold, which to me was last night, they can go out and tell the people, don't spend the night here, go to the shelter. Or they can do that. Or two is that they need to be aware, these people walking the streets and they're there. Again, I'm talking, and I'm hoping, because I've heard nothing but good about your sheriff's office here. The police department there would cruise the streets during the midnight shift and stop everybody that was walking the street and ask them if they had a place to go. And if they didn't, they'd say, hop in, we can take you to shelter. No problem, you're not in trouble. Just, we'll give you a lift to the shelter. And so the police officers are really pretty in touch with this and are pretty well, they go along with it. Because they don't want to go out and investigate a frozen person, I can guarantee you that. Okay, forced to leave home, that's kind of like a runaway. You know, dad and the child getting a fight, or maybe dad, maybe he comes home, the child comes home after smoking pot or something, it's a little stone, dad throws him out of the house. And they have no place to go, so those would find those coming to the shelter. Again, usually the case for that is the sheriff's office. There is housing out there. I don't know what it is here. You know, all I do is read in the journal about how there is no housing here. But generally, when you get public housing, it takes at least 20 months to get in after you've applied. That's if you have identification. And also, if you can prove that you were formerly a resident of that community. Let me give you an example. I spent years doing this. They had a whole housing authority where I worked. And their job was to put people in public housing. So we'd shuffle the homeless there, say, you know, go down and apply for a house. Well, you know, they gave them apartments. They changed the regulations that you could, after 2 years, we kept putting these people, they changed the regulations so that they had to show up with something to prove that they were a member of that community, such as a lease, an electric bill, a gas bill, something like that. So they didn't want to deal with it anymore. They wouldn't even take your application if you couldn't prove that. They didn't want to give out the housing. That's another story. Section 8 housing, you all know what that is. That's government-sponsored housing where they can pay half, about 2/3 of your rent. It takes, what do I got here? It takes, 35 months to get that kind of housing. So getting government-subsidized housing is almost impossible for these folks. Health problems cause homelessness. Okay, let's talk about health problems. This is really a significant issue. Health problems cause you to lose your job, they cause you to find all kinds of problems. So you're on the street and you've got some kind of chronic illness. But it may not be chronic, it may be just a significant one. Being on the street complicates recovery. You're out there, you're not eating well, you're not sleeping right, you're filthy. It just creates the problem of getting better. It creates a problem for you to get better. So you haven't got money for medicine. You know, we were fortunate in the program that I was in. Every Tuesday, a PA from the physician's assistant from the local hospital would hold a clinic for our guys. He was so good. He was a Iraq vet that had done this same stuff. He was a physician's assistant in Iraq. And he showed up with this huge backpack every Tuesday. And he'd come in and he'd see whoever wanted to see him. And in that backpack was all kinds of medicine. And he'd pass out the medicine. Well, that's fine. Some people, you know, diabetics, for instance, need more than just a month's supply or something like that. A mental health person needs all kinds of medication, needs to keep it and take it constantly. And we used to go out and find the guys on mental health, the mental health team. We would go out and find the guys they lived under the bridge there. We have one bridge where most of them lived under. Go out and find the guys with mental health problems and ask them if they took their medicine that day. And if they didn't, I'm out. Do some more. So those are the things that you need to do, which we can't do here yet. But I'm saying these are what I'm talking about. Health issues are complicating the homelessness. And of course, getting better makes it a real problem. Maintaining personal health. And okay, one of the other things. Remember I told you the average age lifespan for someone being homeless is 42 to 50 years of age? Well, that's rapid aging. Now, none of us in this room are really young. We know as we get older, things take longer to heal, more things pop up as we get a little older. What the average person over the age of 60 is on 6 medications. I don't know, what that is, but that's the average. So, and besides, people don't take medicine anyway, they're supposed with it. 2/3 of people that get prescriptions from their doctor don't fulfill them, don't fill the prescription, and those that do, only 20% take them as directed. So imagine if you're homeless, how that really impacts things.
Well, I think that's a good point to take note of in terms of, in terms of just expecting the reality of someone who might be under the care of a doctor who's not complying.
Well, it's true, that's,
And they show up at the shelter, but we'll get to that in a second.
right, okay, and that kind of leads into it. And of course, the realities of exposure. As you get exposed to cold weather, your immune system drops. Your whole system begins to slow down. So the realities of exposure are you need, and if you're ill, I guarantee you're going to have more issues, or it's going to complicate whatever issues you have. And the last one I got for that one is competing demands. Okay, I want to take care of myself, so I'm going to go see the doctor. But it's 6 o'clock and I'm hungry. Where am I going to go? Am I going to go get a meal, or am I going to go to the doctor? Same thing. It's cold outside. I haven't got the warm clothes to go see the physician. So where am I going to go? The competing demands of healthcare versus the realities of living today are very significant. And they're generally going to go for the immediate. I mean, I think we even do that. How many, you get a cold day, a real cold day, or you're not filling up the car and you've got a dentist appointment. We'll use that for an example. That's easy to cancel. You call up and say, Doc, I can't make it today. Well, it's these people, And the dental thing, that is really a problem among the homeless, because they haven't taken care of their teeth. And they get a toothache, they get an abscessed tooth. Number one, they're in significant pain. Number two, you have someone that could really, really get sick as a result of that abscessed tooth. Now, I've heard great things about the dentist in this town, because I check around to find out who should I go see when I have to go to the dentist. And I get various names. But again, that was a significant problem for us. And we had a couple of dentists in town that would, pull a tooth for nothing, and that's generally what they did. But again, the realities is there's competing differences between taking care of one's health and taking care of one's immediate needs. Remember I talked about survival? That's what they're looking for, is survival at this point. So, they come see us. And I'm going to get into, in a few minutes, I'm going to get into the rules, and I'm going to get into some do's and don'ts on how to deal with those people that come see us. But I have on that little sheet, you have the schedules to be announced. Renee, I think, has already done it. As soon as we can, we'll open up, and then we'll shut down whenever we have to. And we also have to face the realities of the world. This is a new program. The town people, the churches, or whoever haven't been prepared for it. So we're asking them to kind of bend over backwards and give us a hand. And from what I've seen, they're doing it. And as I guarantee you, as it goes along, because there's I hate to say this, but there's a lot of fear about this. I'm going to open my church up to you folks to let these people in. When you leave, is someone having going to defecate on the floor? Are they going to urinate in the corner? Are they going to leave needles around? I can guarantee you, in the 6 years I worked there, that never happened once. People are afraid they're violent. I can tell you this. We had 60 men every night and about 20 women. One time in 6 years did a woman get drunk, come over to the men's shelter and was gonna cut her husband's heart out with a broken vodka bottle because she felt he was cheating on her. Well, she never got past the front door, of course, and he was in the bathroom and didn't even know what's going on. But as I say, that's the only violent incident we had in 6 years. And you can talk about how many numbers of men and women that we saw during the course of the year. The variety of people, that was the only time. We had a couple of scuffles, 2 homeless men, plus actually women, because it was over cell phones.
Sorry.
You put women together, these homeless women, it's like putting cats in a bag. It does make, the people that did those shelters really had their work cut out.
You were saying that the runaways, that this would not be available to I'm assuming you're implying under 18, that it wouldn't be available
I
to
didn't
them?
say that.
Okay.
I said the first thing we'll do is call the sheriff's office. We'll turn them over to family, because I don't know what your population here is for deputies, but they can generally resolve the issue. If it's a runaway, they can take it home, work out whatever the problems are. I can tell you that most of the time, the law enforcement aspect of it can resolve the issues so that the person is no longer home. Now, if they can't resolve them,
Well,
then they'll be brought to Family Resource Center.
we get one call, one kid turned into the sheriff, kids in need will never come again. I mean, and they might need those resources.
Yeah, so we discussed that at our last meeting, and do most of you know Jennifer Armstrong at the Family Resource Center?
Yeah.
It's a really sensitive matter, and we don't know how to handle that exactly, but we also are not willing to jeopardize the whole program because a kid wants to assert their right to stay in a homeless shelter. So the way that we discuss handling it is to notify Jennifer, and Jennifer has her finger on the pulse of who the guardians are and what's happening administratively with runaways and so I don't think Dwight means, they call the sheriff, get the sheriff in here kind of thing. It's more like, that has to be handled sensitively. They can certainly come into the shelter, but then the volunteer will be required to notify law enforcement. We don't have authority over this child. And so, it would jeopardize the whole program. Go ahead, Mary.
I was thinking if there's some kind of certification or qualifications that a volunteer of the shelter could have, so that they could be there if there was a child that was a runaway, like, maybe a court-appointed type person that would be qualified and certified to be able to house that child.
And as you can imagine, it's a cold night, the shelter's activated, a teen, runaway or not, shows up, or someone under 18 shows up, they're going to tell us they're 18, so we're unwitting in that regard. But say they're 13 and clearly not 18, Jennifer is the person that we plan to contact, and she has a lot of resources and knowledge about this type of situation. And we decided as a group that if that couldn't be resolved through the normal channels in that moment or that evening, that they would end up at the Family Resource Center. So, which requires another volunteer, or 2, in that case, over there. So it's not simple, but we know this island, you know how we are. I just went down to Windermere and got copies because I couldn't figure out how to do it. I'm like, hey, can I get some copies? And they were like, sure. It was Sotheby's, actually. But we'll figure it out to the best of our ability. But it has a strong possibility of presenting itself.
So it's not just a rote call to the sheriff, it's dealing with the Family Resource Center and kind of dealing with it in case.
Yes, I think with all due respect to Dwight, he is coming from a really large den. And if a demographic, and if a bunch, you know, if people underage and they've got, you know, 60 men and 20 women, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I gotta call the sheriff and let them know you're here, you know, that is probably how it went down in his town, and I can't imagine that going on here, just exactly like that. So, is that,
It kind of answers it.
I know, we
I
don't
hope
have
that
an
we
answer.
can provide a good, solid, safe place for kids who need it, who happen to be kind of chronically not living at home.
Yeah.
And it's cold, and they're
Yep.
in some barn. They
Isn't
can
there
come in.
Safe San Juan?
Yeah,
They also work with that situation too,
Yeah.
so.
so we would defer to Jennifer on that, because she knows. She knows, and she's very involved in the shelter.
Thanks, Nick.
Well, one of, on a corollary note here, pets.
Yeah.
They don't come in. They have all kinds of problems, I know, we have all kinds of problems. Well, my suggestion, we haven't really discussed this, is that the pet doesn't come, we've talked about animal control, would be willing to take them and everything, but let me give you a little kind of what happened. A woman shows up at our shelter, and she's got a, what's it called, one of those, comfort animal.
Oh, no.
Therapy. Well, this is a therapy cat. And so I went, no, I'm not letting a cat in because a number of reasons. People, there's too many problems with having to do with allergies and everything like this. I said, your cat can stay in another room, but your cat's not going to stay with you. And I checked, I did a real quick check on the internet, there's no such thing as a therapy cat. And if anybody owns a cat, you know full well, they own, you don't own them, they own you.
Yeah.
So, you know, so she left. Next night, she shows up with the cat again. She's not allowed in with the cat. The cat can stay in another room. Can't bring it into the main shelter area. And so, but 2 weeks later, we get a letter from a lawyer. And I don't know, but he didn't demand that we, this happened to me, that he didn't demand that we let her in because she had this cat, she had this document that was supposed to be certified as a therapy cat. There was no place in the world that organization existed. But he was just saying, why don't you let her in and things like that. Of course, we never did, and she never showed up again. But pets go up there, therapy cats, we don't take. So, because there are all kinds of problems with taking a cat. Or a dog too, for that matter. Okay, I'd like to kind of go through some, we've got a thing of shelter rules, and I want to kind of add a little explanation maybe to some of them. Okay. Everyone has to fill out a registration form. Again, we don't care what name they put on it, they can put, you know, Joe Blow, John Smith, whatever they want, but we want to have some kind of information about them. Now, a couple of reasons are for helping them. Number one, do you have a chronic medical condition? Are you taking medication? Because if something goes wrong, and we have to call 911, we'd like this person to be able to tell the paramedics that this person told us that they're suffering from diabetes and that they normally take insulin, but they don't have it. And of course, that gives the paramedics all kinds of information. So they have them do that. And next of kin. Some of them have, we'll fill out a next of kin. If something happens to this person, we want to notify someone. Give you the example of the 2 people that died where I used to live. No red next of kin for one of them, the woman. So they cremated her and put her in the memory garden at the local church where they held the homeless can go every noon and get a full meal. And the other one put down his homeless, his sister in Florida. His sister said, I don't care what you do with it, I'm not interested. But again, if they're just sick, whether they're dead or not, but if they just get sick, we'd like to have some kind of people in contact and maybe provide some resources or some help in helping them out. So we always ask for next of kin. If they don't have any, fine, but we'd like to know what they do. And the other is, are you a veteran? The VA does a fantastic job of finding homes for people. So we'd like to know if you're a veteran, at least we can get you tied up with somebody that can help you out.
If I may also, when the shelter guest comes in and they're filling out the form, a nice way to greet them is to say, what do you like to be called? Instead of what's your name, because what's your name can be a demand, whereas what do you like to be called is a little more welcoming, and, you know, they might change it every day, I don't know.
That's on my other list of things, how to deal with people.
Oh, sorry.
No problem. But no, that's in fact true, and I'll get to some examples of that and why we do that. Violence and disruptive behavior will not be tolerated. You can't have it. It's generally not a problem, and they're told that if they are violent, they'll be asked to leave. And if they don't want to leave, that's what make the sheriff's office for. So, you know, we don't have to tolerate their violent or disruptive behavior. And, you know, if they come in and they've had too much to drink, and they're being okay, allow them in, give them something to eat, go to bed. That's what 90% of them will do. That's fine. And then you take it from there. If they don't want to behave themselves, again, they can be asked to leave. We're not going to ruin the program for one person. We're not going to ruin the rest of the guest time there for one person. No weapons, alcohol, illegal drugs. What we used to do was say, guys, you got any weapons? And, you know, you can give it to us, and we'll give it to you again in the morning. There's only one person brought up a knife, and it was about, you know, about full clasp knife, about this big, and we still own it because he never picked it up in the morning. We wouldn't take a gun, but we don't expect them to do that. Alcohol, they can't have with them, they get a choice. You either keep the alcohol and leave, or you can give us the alcohol and we'll give it back to you in the morning. Because it's legal to possess alcohol. You can give it to us, we'll give it back to you in the morning if you want, or you can leave with it. Illegal drugs, just can't have. If we find you with it, and we don't search backpacks, but we didn't. But you see it laying there or something like that, you know, or you smell it, out you go. Foul language or fighting, of course, won't be tolerated. You know, we used to just tell them, hey, you're in the Church of God. We don't talk like that around here. You know, out in the woods you can, but this is a Church of God, so we don't do that. No smoking. We don't want any problems in the church with smoking, so we say no smoking. If you're caught smoking inside, you'll be asked to leave. The restroom is where they'll do it, because they think they're going to get away with it in there, and they'll be asked to leave. That's just, everybody gets a copy of these when they come in, these rules when they come in, handed to them, so you can't say I didn't know. What I hope to have is like a little first aid kit available with non-alcohol cough syrup, because some people are very sensitive to alcohol, so we don't want an alcoholic getting any, you know, it's a different kind of alcohol, but still, it's alcohol, so we use non-alcoholic cough syrup. Ibuprofen, Tylenol, two things. If they're feeling lousy with a fever, you want to give them Tylenol, which as far as I'm concerned is worthless for anything else. And if they've just got a headache or something like that, go ahead and give them some ibuprofen. Don't give out aspirin. That creates all kinds of problems for some people. So we don't give out aspirin. And we have a Band-Aid or two in there, but that's about it. Anything else, they need to get more professional help, and we can certainly give them. So, but they can take their own over-the-counter medication, or they, of course, they can take their own prescribed medication. And we encourage it for them to do that, even if they have to get woken up in the middle of the night to take something. You know, or if you know they're supposed to, they tell you they're supposed to take it in the morning, they'll ask them, you know, they take whatever you're taking. So, you're supposed to take mail.
How about people that arrive to the door inebriated or under the influence of something? Do you kind of screen that, or?
I would say, yes, we kind of screen them, because, you know, I hate kick somebody out because of that, you know, but that's the whole point. You talk to them, say, look, why don't you get something to eat and go to bed? And I'll tell you, 90% of the time, that'll happen. But if they decide to go the other way, then they'll be asked to leave. I am just totally against throwing someone out because, you know, an alcoholic's an alcoholic, a drug addict's a drug addict. So just because they did it, you know, doesn't make them, I always use the words, you know, hate the sin, love the sinner. You know, hate the fact that they're using alcohol to abuse, but I kind of like the guy or gal. So let's bring them in and see how they behave, because we can always get rid of them. But if you throw them out because they have this particular problem, and something happens, and you're going to feel pretty crummy. So allow them in, see how they behave, and if they don't, then they can leave.
Which is why we have 2 volunteers on, or one reason why.
One reason. Take their medication, lights out at 10 o'clock, I mean cell phones as well. Cell phones are a pain. They think they can get away with going under the blanket and talking and things like this, but the biggest pain they have is turning up missing. 9 times out of 10, they're mislated. But still, cell phones are a real problem. 10 o'clock, lights out, doors close at 10 o'clock. You can go out and smoke until 10 o'clock. After 10 o'clock, if you go out, you don't come back in. And that's made very clear. And the person that's up at 10 o'clock can tell them. The guy goes out and say, listen, if you go out and have a cigarette, you're not coming back in. That's a hard and fast rule. And they get a choice. Most, of course, will decide to stay. Doors close at 10 o'clock. Now, if somebody shows up after 10 o'clock, I would prefer, but not going to happen here, I know, that they be accompanied by a sheriff, deputy sheriff. Because if somebody shows up at that hour, why haven't they shown up sooner? Kind of like that. An initial screening, you might say, by some law enforcement officer, but I know that's not going to happen here. So, fine. You know, they show up at 10 o'clock, at 2 o'clock in the morning. I don't know. That's something we haven't decided yet. Still, I hate like heck to leave them outside. But if they've been out that long, who knows? If they need anything, they just ask us. And we always say we can't help you, but they shouldn't try and, you know, do things on their own. If they need some help, I hope they ask us, and they should be told that. You know, what we used to do, the meal is set out, say we're going to serve the soup, which some of you had it. It's really pretty good stuff.
It was really good.
It was really good, and it was very hearty. So, you know, I was kind of thinking, when they first told me they were going to serve soup, I was thinking, that's not going to hold anybody. That's kind of, you know, mean. But no, the soup was pretty good stuff. So, you know, before the soup gets served, everybody goes, okay, here are the rules, go through the rules one more time. And we say grace before they did. That's up to you folks. And then they got the rules, and again, at that time they're saying, if you need anything, or you think you got a problem, see one of us, and we'll see what we can do about it. Because there's a lot of information in this room about resources in this community. So maybe if they have this issue or something like that, I think we can give them a point in the right direction. Okay, any questions about the rules? They're fairly straightforward and fairly simple. Nothing exotic. They're common sense. So, okay.
And they'll be posted by
Well, we suggest to give you a copy when it comes in. So you can't say I didn't know. Here's a copy.
So I have a question. When they come in, we don't know if they're dyslexic or can't read. We offer, would you like us to read this to you?
Oh, sure. If they say tell you that they can't, or you,
Well, they're
or
probably
it's
not
pretty
gonna.
obvious that they can't, then, you know, if they sign with a mark or something like that, Yeah, go ahead, you know, but if I was gonna do that, I'd kind of take them aside, so that everybody doesn't know that this guy, the gal can't read or write. No, then it's likely to happen, no problem with that. Or that, now, language is another story. You know, that's, of course, that's really a terrific problem. But
I've worked with some homeless people in it with regards to another organization, and I find that they really like to have you help out.
Oh, yes.
I mean, it gives them some attention right at the outset.
That, and they don't like forms anyway, because every form they've filled out, they got a no for. So, no, help them out, that's no problem, just don't, you know, say, here's a form, sign it. No, just sit there with it. And we, 9 times out of 10, we filled it out form. You know, just sat there, it's real simple. What name should, I'll get to that in a minute. What name would you like us to call you? You know, if you got any chronic, if you got any medical conditions that we should know about. It's all done in a conversation, not choo. You do it in the course of a conversation. It's colder than hell out tonight. Is that going to affect any medical problems you got? You know, that kind of talk. Not just name, rank, serial number, things like that. So, yeah, do it in a conversation.
And are we also allowing for different language, like we're gonna have Spanish at all available in Spanish?
I don't know anything about that, I'm sorry. I know that's a problem, we ran into it. Fortunately, what we had there was other homeless would help us out. One of the things you're going to learn real quick is they will police themselves. Because they know if it's screwed up, they're gonna lose this and everybody loses. So they find themselves, you find that they're gonna police it. They got this person that's creating a problem, someone will have a conversation with them. No, it's not the way I want things handled, but we used to see guys have really a problem some night, and they'd come the next night, they'd be black and blue. And somebody had a conversation with them out at the camp. And they behaved themselves after that.
Wow.
Sir?
How do you handle possibly undocumented immigrants that may show up?
We didn't care. It's not our problem. We're providing a shelter out of the cold, period. That was our attitude. We're not a government agency.
There are a lot of other agency considerations that people that may utilize a shelter may have, but if we are a sodality. I like that distinction. The one thing that we do is provide shelter on certain nights when the shelter is activated. That's all we're set up to do. We're not set up to, we're not social workers, as Dwight mentioned. You know, in fact, I think he'll go on to, maybe we should take a break in a minute, or, I don't know. You know, Dwight will, in a few minutes, go on to, you know, addressing guests of the shelter outside of the shelter context. And, you know, we're not equipped to be social workers, but we can all make soup and coffee and be kind.
So the shelter really, from going to the meetings and stuff, is that we're there to help, we're not there to judge.
Right.
That really, alcoholism is a serious disease. It's an illness. And so you might want to react from a social background or standpoint, but it's a true illness. The same thing with drugs. It's a true illness. You can't just go, it's just alcoholic. They're a human being, and that's where we have to come from. And the rest of it, other organizations will take care of.
With regards to the Hispanic community, I would be so surprised if any of that community ends up at the shelter. Because when
What
they-
I've seen here, I doubt that is
Yeah, I
well.
mean, they're very tight, and when they come out, they ask us everything, they have to let somebody else.
What I've seen, and I've had, I guess I'll even mention his name, because everybody likes him, Roberto, his crew come out and
Yes.
do an awful lot of work
Roberto.
at my place. And, you know, I've spoken with them, and, you know, I had a refrigerator that I didn't need, and I offered it, and I said, you know, anybody here need a refrigerator? The next day it was gone, somebody had one. And things like, well, you know, I think you're probably right in that regard, but, you know, you never know what's gonna show up. You never know what's gonna show up at your door, that's all I can say. And you really have to think on your feet sometimes. And you know, the job I had, I used to go in the evening, and I'd see things were going well, and volunteers were there. I'd leave when the midnight volunteers showed up. I'd leave, I'd go home, but I was on call if something happened. And I, you know, probably in the course of a year, I might receive 10 phone calls, most of which I could resolve on the phone, and some of them I'd have to get in my car and go in at 3 o'clock in the morning. That was usually a mental health issue. So, you know, you never know what's going to happen when you walk in the door. But there are resources available, and I'm going to, you know, don't mean to put myself out there, but, you know, I've told Winnie, that, you know, if you need someone that has that resource, call me up. I don't live that far. I live on a Mineral Point. I can get there in no time, so fine. Sir.
Do you have any way to keep ICE agents from coming in the door and looking at whoever you've got there?
Never happened, I can tell you that. But
It will.
it is, they can't.
That's good.
Because it is private property.
That's good.
They can't do it because it is private, it's not, okay. This is my background. My last 6 years, I spent as a special agent with the U.S. Department of Justice. And I know what they can do and they can't do, and they can't do that. You know, they're dead wrong if they come into a church and do that, particularly a church. As far as I know, they wouldn't even consider it. But you always get a road. And, you know, from what I've seen, your Customs and Border Protection people here are definitely part of the community. So, it's what I've seen about them. I don't know them by any stretch of the imagination, but I see them walking around, and, you know, everybody talking to them and things like that. You can spot them in their blue uniforms. Ma'am?
What does the midnight volunteers do, midnight to 6 a.m. or whatever?
Just hang out, drink coffee.
Stay awake.
If you've got a room for men and a room for women, they're not in those rooms?
That was something that we discussed at the meetings. My volunteers slept because they were volunteers. And they had jobs the next morning. And it never created a problem. Normally what they would do is there were two of them, you know, one would do 2 hours, next would do 2 hours, next would do 2 hours. So they get a little sleep. Here, if you're going to put one on a stipend, they can stay awake all night. And it's just, number one, it's a fire watch. Two, if you spot a problem early, you can stop it a lot easier. So if you see someone with a cell phone at 2 o'clock in the morning, hey, no cell phones, okay? Fine, because what's going to happen if one sees one get away with it, the other going to pick up their cell phone, and they're going to make their phone call, and then you created a real problem. It's just, catch problems early.
So would you be in the room while they're sleeping, or are you out?
You're wandering around.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
you're wandering around, you can sit in your chair and your feet up or something like that, read a book.
I don't want to watch them sleep.
Yeah, yeah, and it's basically just a security watch is all it is. Okay, ma'am.
I just wanted to back up to the person that asked about the Life Care Center. The Life Care Center is owned by a private corporation that owns 200 other centers in the United States, and it is totally shut down. They've removed tons of equipment, the generator is not working. There's a whole bunch of problems there anyway, but it's not a local thing that could happen here because it's not owned by anybody locally.
Thank you.
Take 10, then we'll cover how you should interact, how I feel you should interact with these folks.
One break.
Let's kind of talk a little bit about interacting with these folks. Nothing complicated, but there's a few things, maybe a little hints I can give you. First thing is, there's got to be a pot of coffee waiting for them. Because they're cold, they come in, and they want a cup of coffee. Make it decaf.
Oh, I bought,
Okay, well,
They'll be up all night.
then you spend
Yeah,
the
they'll be
night.
up all night.
And this is serious, I'm serious about this. We gave decaf in the evening, regular coffee in the morning. Because it's, keeping them, some people are more susceptible to the caffeine than others, but it made a difference, believe me. Okay, when somebody first comes in, somebody ought to greet them. Okay. Just by saying hello, welcome. That's all at that point. And then that's so the thing. One of the things that I noticed, this had nothing to do with homeless. For something to do, my ex-wife's husband owned a candy company in Bethlehem. You ever seen Peeps, little yellow Peeps? Well, yeah, okay, he had that. And so I would deliver candy. And, for a little something to do with it. And I go to the warehouse, and I sat, and the warehouse had a lot of truckers come in. And I'd stand there, and the person behind the counter would not acknowledge the trucker when they came up. They would be busy on their computer working on something else, not just ignoring them, but working on something else. And they wouldn't acknowledge them whatsoever, not even say, hi, I'll be with you in a minute. How many of you go into a restaurant and they don't acknowledge you, even if you have to wait a few minutes to get seated? You walk in, they say, hi, I'd like to, be just a minute, okay? If you just sit there, and you feel pretty crummy. And so, just, acknowledge that you see them. Introduce yourself by whatever name you want to go by. And we used to get volunteers that were a little fearful, they wouldn't give them the right name. But introduce yourself. Hi, I'm Mary, it's good to see you. Or hi, I'm Joe, it's nice to have you here tonight. Just something simple like that. Don't wait for them to come to you, because they're going to stand off like this and watch what's going on. Because they don't know. You've never had a shelter. They don't know if ICE is going to show up. They don't know if the sheriff's going to show up. They may have a traffic warrant for them or something like that. So they're going to stand back, and that's not nice. Walk up, greet them. Hello, it's good to see you. My name is Dwight. And then you can take it from that. Don't feel that, I say this only to say it, don't blame them for their situation. It's drugs, alcohol, mental illness, homelessness, for whatever reason, it may be their fault. But that's not for us to say. Think about them as that night. They're cold, they're wet, they may be hungry. That's all you need to know. And you're here to give them a warm place to sleep, something hot to drink, and a meal. That's all. There are people, most of them are people down on their luck. A lot of them, may not want to be inside, but most of them are down on their luck. And they're not to be pitied. Well, you want to turn them off real quick. Act like you're pitying them, and they won't like it at all. Don't touch. A lot of these people, I won't even use the strong word paranoid, but they're victims of abuse. Don't touch them. You can offer your hand, fine. But don't go up and put your arm around them. Let me tell you about it. Lovely little old lady. She's 60 years old. She's my wife's favorite person. She's homeless and has been homeless for 20 years. But if you touched, I don't care, man or woman, touched her, she would go crazy. This is how bad she was. She carries a cart, as you think, homeless people do. She didn't have a push cart. She had a luggage cart she pulled behind her. I opened the door for her one day because she was coming up the sidewalk. I opened the door for her one day. She dropped the cart and was gone 3 blocks. Because it was a man, in my case, it was a man. One of the shelter volunteers went down and told her, you know Dwight, he's not gonna bother you. I've been there a couple of years already. Anyway, finally I got to, now I can walk up to her and she'll talk to me. But, yeah, don't touch them. I was giving an example of someone I knew just about an hour ago, and I touched the person in the back of the neck. That's because I knew this guy. I've known him for 10 years. This Mike, the guy with the leg. I'd known him for 10 years, and I wasn't worried about it. But I'd never think about touching somebody else. Shaking your hands, that's a socially recognized okay. Don't go up and put your hand on their shoulder or touch their arm. It's not going to happen. Don't do it. Even though you feel it's harmless. Understand their personal space is larger than yours. We're 18 inches in the front, 3 feet in the back, 18 inches to the side. Triple theirs. Triple that for them. Don't get too close because you'll shut them down. So if you're going to sit at a table with them, make sure there's some space between you and the table. If you're going to eat a meal or drink a cup of coffee with them, you can sit next to them, but make sure there's some space between you. Because they are so suspicious because out there in the world, there's two different worlds. You got the shelter where it's nice and safe, we're going to prove to them it is, versus the world out there where they spend all their time thinking about survival. So, okay, but triple the space. Okay, I've got here, don't ask about their day. How was your day? You'll probably get the response, in part of my language, pretty shady. Ask them, how are things going? That's okay. And then they can tell you about their day, whatever they want to tell you. It's a way of engaging the conversation, engaging them in conversation, but don't go through the one about, how's your day been? It's been lousy. Let's talk about something else. How are things going? They can then fill it in. I'm glad to be here. Things I found this place. I'm glad that I read it up at the, courthouse or something like this, where it'll be posted. Don't look them in the eye. Everybody thinks you should make contact with someone. You look them in the eye, they're like, I hate to use this example, but I'm going to. They're like an animal. You look them in the eye, and it's a thing of hostility. Look over their shoulder. You can look in their face, look towards their face, but put it over their shoulder a little bit. Tilt it to the right a little bit or to the left. Don't stare at them. And if you do that, you're going to be able to maintain conversation. Now, as you're making the conversation with them, and then you've engaged them, that's another story. Then you can look them straight in the face and things like that, but not at first. Look over their shoulder, just past their face and over the shoulder and everything. Doesn't have to be obvious like this, but, just kind of look at them. It's like I did as a clinician when I first meet somebody. They come into my office. I never looked them in the face. Right in the face, just right over their shoulder. They get the point that I'm there for them, but I'm not staring them down. Oh yeah. Be aware of the language you're going to hear. May not be used to what you hear. It's a way, it's a defense mechanism for most of them, because they're going to try and drive you off. There's no question about that. They're going to try and see how much you can take. And if you accept it, you're not used to being talked to this, or talked in a conversation of using every word known to man, swear word known to man. But that's just the way they do it. And if you accept that initially, what you'll notice is it'll go down as you speak with them, as you talk with them. Because they know you're accepting of them, even at their worst. So therefore, and if it truly troubles you, say, we don't need to talk like that here. This is God's house. blame it on the big fellow upstairs. And so then do that. But don't be surprised if you hear a few fights and things like that. It's gonna happen. Let them make the choices. They're gonna make some choices, whether they go outside and smoke after 10 o'clock, they choose not to give up their alcohol. You know, they can make those choices, we're not making them for them, but they can also be advised of the consequences of that particular behavior. Or if they're talking about something, and you know that if they do it, it might be bad for them, or even if it's gonna be good for them, you can advise them of what you believe the consequences to such behavior is going to be. It's just in a conversational tone, you know. So, the choices are theirs, but then again, don't give special favors. No. Treat all, I've got the next thing, don't accept gifts. You know, and you don't have to, they say, if they want to give you a gift, say they've made a painting or drawing or something like this, they give it to you. Say, well, I can't personally accept this, but I'll accept it maybe on behalf of the shelter. The rules, blame the rules, and say, I can't accept gifts. I know when I was in the Secret Service, we used to be, I remember Emperor Haile Selassie gave us all on his detail gold Rolexes. I'd love to have that thing. But, Your Highness, we can't take this. You know, we can't take it. If you want to give it to us, you have to give it to the State Department. If it goes to the State Department, it goes into some big warehouse someplace and it just sits there. So we couldn't do this. That was not infrequent. Again, blame the rules. You don't have to accept responsibility for it. Don't give gifts. I know, as sure as I'm standing here, somebody's going to want to help these people out by giving them $5. No. Don't give them anything. It just opens the door. Particularly on a small island like this. You give them $5, they see you downtown, you're going to be a touch to give. No, don't give them any gifts. If they want something, again, they can ask, and we can either provide it or not provide it, or tell them where they can go get it. Don't give them money. I'll say it again. Don't give them money, because you don't know, first of all, what that money is going to be spent for, and second of all, it's just opening the door to something you don't want to do. Now, what I used to do, I remember when I was an agent in Washington, people would come up and hit you up for $1. You know, it's always $1. And I'd say, no, why don't we go over, you say, I'm hungry, and you have like $1. Okay, why don't we do this? I'd take them to the diner, lay a $10 bill on the counter, and say, feed them. Whatever that $10 will get them. But who knows, they're going to buy drugs, they're going to buy alcohol, if I gave them any more. But that way I'd ensure that they got what they said they were going to do, would be hungry. If they didn't want it, the waitress kept it. Don't offer them a place to stay. Oh, how many times I have seen that happen. People will get to know someone in shelter and offer them, I've got this spare room over the apartment, over my garage, why don't you stay there until things get you? No, we'll never get rid of it. My ex-wife did that. And she's still suffering from that, and that's 25 years ago because of what happened. So don't offer them a place to stay. Show concern for their personal belongings. That's all they have. You know, don't say something, well, why don't you take your stuff out of that and put it over here? No. Why don't you take your belongings that you have and bring them on over here? That's all they have. Show concern for it. Try and ensure that it's taken care of. You know, if it's in the way, hey, somebody might steal something out of that, why don't you put it over here? Something like that. Okay, you're gonna have to show tolerance for differences in religion, spiritual and political beliefs, and cultural beliefs. And when we talked about, this is one that happened, I don't know about it here, but again, it happened to me quite frequently, was transgender population. When he said, what name would you like to be called? Your name might be Michael, but you want to be called Michelle, or whatever it is. And respect the fact that this person is going through this transition, or even if not, they're going through it, that's what they're claiming for whatever reason. You'll find a lot of mentally ill people might do that, claim to be going through a transition from male to female or female to male. It gives them special identity, at least what I've seen. But if they want to be called Jane instead of Joe, fine, we can care less. Just tell us what you'd like to be called for. Now, if you are male, going towards female, you live with the males. If you are female and you're going toward being the male, you live with the females. Never once was there a problem. Never once. If they want to kind of stay away from the other, you got all the cots lined up, and they want maybe an extra cot space between that and the next person, that's cool. Except the fact that this person understands they're going to have a problem in that. I don't know if that's something you're going to run into here, but it's not wasn't infrequent in our situation. Treat all guests equally. You may know somebody from the outside world. You've seen them, you've known them. For some reason, maybe they've had coffee with you, or you have coffee at the Crow's Nest when they have coffee there, or something like that. They don't get any more special attention from you than the rest of the people. Because there's only two of you, remember, so you got to kind of spread yourself around. Because that'll be spotted real quick by the rest of the guests. I use that word guest, not homeless. Some people refer to them as neighbors. I never could get in touch with that one. But they're guests. They're our guests. And we treat them as if we would treat a guest in our house. Enforce and follow all rules equally. The rules are very simple. We don't bend them. They're not negotiable. Those are the rules. You either follow them or you don't. Don't take anything personally. That is a tough one to do if you're not used to dealing with people. I mean, the first time somebody calls you a vile name, you know, just it's water off a duck's back. They don't know you. I mean, I used to think, you know, they call me a son of a bitch. They don't know my mother. You know? So, okay. I don't think she is, but okay, I didn't know it. So just water off the duck's back and say, you know, you can say something like, hey, you don't need to do that. That's what I usually do. Don't promise something you can't deliver on. That's been happening all their lives. So, you know, you're going to promise you're going to do something, recommend you don't, make sure you can cover it, make sure you can do it. As a police officer, we used to always tell the other younger officers, don't give an or else unless you've got an or else in your pocket. So, you know, so we'll give them a promise unless you can do something with it. Don't let things in the shelter go unattended. Think dangerous or violation or dangerous interactions go unattended. Because again, I want to emphasize, if you catch it early, it's easier to stop. It's like a train. It's easier to stop a train when it's just moving than if it's going 60 miles an hour. So if you see something happening, attend to it. If you don't think you should attend to it, make a phone call. Ma'am.
Is there a problem if somebody becomes in need or appears to be in need of medical help during the night, say, and they don't want you to call 911? Is there a liability for not calling?
If you made the effort, and I'm going to throw this one back on you as well. If you see the person is significantly in distress, say they're not breathing well. Maybe they're having an asthma attack, or they're having problems, breathing. And you see that, and they don't want you to call, because what will happen is they don't want you to call because they're afraid they're going to have to pay for it. Is if you significantly think they are in deep trouble, I don't care if they say no, call anyway. Because then they can refuse the EMS folks. And if they refuse the EMS folks, that's another whole ballgame. So, no, if they don't want you to call them, give them a break, okay, but watch them, and if they go into distress, call them. Heck with them.
And you can request also that they not have any lights or sirens. You can call EMS. I recommend that with any uncertainty, you call EMS and say, please, no lights or sirens, and they'll indulge that.
And
And then
what
that
happens with-
individual will have an opportunity to refuse service with EMS. So then we're out of that loop, and EMS has documentation that they refuse service.
It's rare that when EMS shows up that they'll turn them down, because those guys know how to talk the game. Guys and girls, they know how to talk them into it. And they can probably take care of it right there. I don't know what the problem is, but they know how to talk to them. I know my daughter's an EMT, and she tells all these stories, and she doesn't, if they don't want to go, they sign the form, it's all over. It's like, when I was in the Secret Service, some guy, some prime minister or something, if he didn't want our protection because he's here to play, here's the form, sign it. We'll protect you.
What if someone's going through DTs?
That's a medical emergency, that's EMS. DTs is a medical emergency, it will kill you. And last but not least, keep track of your own personal belongings. And I'm not saying that they're going to steal it. But more than one volunteer has set their coat down and come up and seen one of the guests wearing it because the guests thought it was okay to, because we had other coats for them. And they would take the coat and put it on. And purses, well, need I say any more? So pay attention to what your belongings are. And, best thing, put them in another room. That way it's just not a problem.
Maybe we can have a lock cupboard.
I don't know, I'll take a look at the space.
Yeah, we don't know the sites, so we don't know what it is, but at least put it in a room or leave it in your car. You can make it from your car to the shelter without a code. Yeah.
Could I just add a couple of things? If you need to call the sheriff's office, instead of 911, you can call the business number 4151 and talk to the dispatcher, and that way you can be assured that it'll be sent out and there won't be lights or siren. I've done it many, many times.
Excellent idea.
So that's one thing to know on the island. Also, the 3 things back, it said something about promises. It's harder to get a promise from somebody than it is to get an agreement. So getting agreements to the rules are a lot easier than asking somebody for a promise. So just be aware that you can use the word agreement.
Sorry.
I don't know what that is, but also, I used to be the chair of the Mullis Center here, and I want you to all realize that from 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, this really is a cold weather shelter.
Yeah.
And people come here all the time that need to be in a cold weather shelter. So just be aware of that. Also on
I'm in a
Monday
meeting
and
right
Thursday,
now. I can call you back.
the best salad bar on the island is right here. And if you're 60 or over, it's $5, but no one is turned away. No one's ever turned away if they don't have money. So it's the best hot meal and best salad bar on the island. $5.
That's great info.
Yeah,
Thank you, David.
Sure.
And the other place they always go to library.
Pardon?
Library is another place to go.
Libraries, yeah.
What do you do if somebody comes in and they are, how to say it, they're soiled or in a way that is really disruptive to other people? Are we going to have the opportunity to get them in clean clothes or anything? So,
We used to come across with that, we would generally, we had 2 shelters that had showers. And so what we would generally do in that is, give them find some paper towels someplace, find something, things have to go in. I know, it is a problem, and that's,
well, I'm also thinking about whatever sleeping bags or cots or things like that, if they're gonna
well, the
damage.
sleeping bags, all the sleeping bags, if I've got it correct, is they will be individual. Somebody shows up, they use that sleeping bag, it will be put in a plastic box, then they leave with their name on it. And when they come back, they'll get the same one. But what you're talking about then is if it's really filthy and things like that, well, of course, we'll have to trash it. Because those sleeping bags don't wash very well. But again, what we used to find them would be, they come in drunk and soil themselves. And, just send them to the restroom and clean yourself up. And it's an issue that you have to deal with at that moment, doing what resources you have. If someone's got some towels in the car or something like that, maybe we ought to get some to have handy for something like that they can go in and clean themselves up with and things. But no, we don't have showers or anything like that available to them.
No, and we're not gonna have socks or underwear or.
We have socks and underwear.
Okay.
So I was gonna say, thank you for bringing that up, that's a great point. I think I'll order some, some adult wipes or something. And then we do have socks and underwear that will be on site in the van, so should someone come in, clearly could benefit from clean socks and underwear, they'll be available.
Let me say one thing about handing out socks and underwear, 2 pair, period. Because if you give them more than that, the rest gets thrown away. It's just a waste of resources. Yes, sir.
There are a couple of public showers on the island, down at the marina particularly, and you put in quarters and you can take a shower. And I know people who haven't had adequate facilities have used that many times. Also, one of the nicest things I ever saw in a shelter was out in a rural area, and people out of the community would come in and bring in towels, and then they take them home. This shelter happened to have showers, and it was more for the staff, the volunteers, although it was available to anybody. But somebody wants to be able to do something.
That's probably the biggest problem I saw, is adequate showers for people. 2 of the men's churches had them, and 1 of the women's churches had them. And the women would line up, would always run out of hot water because you say 5 minutes and 20 minutes later they get through with their shower. But it is an issue. And I think if we at least get something that they can wipe themselves down with, some towels, some cheap towels that they can clean themselves up with, or we can just toss them. That's probably the best solution. It was never an issue more than a couple of times where somebody, and it was always when they were inebriated and did soil themselves. The next morning, they were so chagrined. Anything else? Yeah.
Would we have like a cleaning kit or something in case there is, because there's 1 bathroom there, in case it needs to be cleaned up after somebody, if it
I'll get
gets
one.
really
That's a great
bad.
idea.
And we
With some
get
gloves
the
and
guests
hand
to do it.
sanitizer?
And you get the guests to do all that stuff. Ask them, go and clean, because they gotta own it. They gotta, I don't want to say pay the price, pay the admission price, but they gotta own this. In other words, so they never have a problem doing it.
Thank you, Mary.
Now, we
That's
don't have
awesome.
any cots, do we?
I'm sorry?
We don't have the cots, do we?
We do. We have the
You got
Red
one?
Cross cots.
Show how to.
Oh, are they here?
Yeah.
Severson's?
Yeah.
That's cute.
If you get one, I want to demonstrate how to put them together. And the only reason I want to do that is to save your fingers. Because they will pinch you well.
Oh, I have another question. Are we going to provide anything for people to be social with one another? Any games or puzzles or things like that?
Probably.
I
There'll
would-
probably be stuff like that there. I would think.
I would suggest we do because they do it. Give them a book, bring in some paperbacks, because a lot of them, you know, do like to read. They got nothing else to do, some of them, so they do read. And a puzzle, stick out a puzzle, then they can, you know, work on it together. It's a social interaction either between you and them or between themselves over something different. We always had a puzzle going. And the books, what else? Magazines.
No television.
Cards. Television is an iffy thing. We used to show a movie because there were no choices. You know, we put them, had 3 DVDs. We take a vote, who gets to watch what movie DVD to watch. But television, you can flip the channels, and that always created a problem.
Like
So-
at our house.
Yeah.
But a DVD, we'd put it in a DVD and they could watch it. Or, yeah, that was about it. And, you know, all kinds of things happen. Oh, these are those nice guys where you don't have to watch your fingers.
Oh, no, finger watching. I wanted to interject maybe before we get going on the, go ahead, Dwight, sorry.
But the whole point is, you know, if you can get them away from thinking survival skills to do something that's there that's nice. Art supplies, you know, colored pencils and a pad of paper. You'd be surprised how artistic some of these folks are, and they like to be able to go out and they like to do it. And I know my wife's an artist, and she'd come down and give lessons. And so they always like that. And, treat them as normal, you know, I like to get them out of the mode of being, I'm a homeless bum out here in the woods. Come in here, I'm a human being like you are. And that carries them on.
What time is
I
lights
can
out?
get kind of fanatic about this.
Lights out at 10 o'clock?
Lights out at 10 o'clock, that's it, 10 o'clock. Lights and cell phone, out. No cigarettes, no going outside for a cigarette. Now, that doesn't mean they have to shut up. You know, they can hold conversations, but that's just, yeah. And most of them are asleep by 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock anyway, because they've had a tough day out there in the cold. So they're usually asleep quite early.
So with the cell phones, they're not even goofing around on their cell phone? Okay.
You playing games?
Just kidding. Yeah, you know, like playing games or,
No, cell phones are done.
because it disrupts
So
other
that,
people.
so that, and it's got the pings and things like that, it always goes